There is an epidemic happening in men today. Weakness and comfort has taken place of strength and purpose. Masculinity is labeled as toxic, and women are now the ones who define what a man is, more than men are. Weak fathers are raising lost boys who are at risk of never being initiated into manhood. We've grown farther and farther from God, which led us to become weaker and weaker. The man within fights back by introducing men to their true strength and purpose through God. So join me, and together we can restore true strength and purpose in men. Hello and welcome to the Man Within podcast. We are on fire this week, 3 days in a row. This is amazing what God is doing for us this week.
Guys, killing it, bro.
Yeah, love to have you here. If this is your first time here to the Man Within podcast, welcome. The Man Within is dedicated to helping men in their walk with God by growing them physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and today, financially. We keep men accountable by giving them the raw truth of the word and sharpening each other with brotherhood. The only way to become the man God called you to be is by living the way God commanded, understanding what godly manhood is, and getting on your path to becoming a godly man. And that is what the Man Within helps doing. So if you are interested in getting more involved in the Man Within community, you can click on the link below or reach out to me directly. That's what I'm here for. You can contact me at cameronwestcoaching@gmail.com or find me on pretty much any form of social media, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, just by looking up the Man Within. But guys, today I am super excited to say we have another incredible guest. Today we have another impactful message from none other than Edward J. Robinson. Edward J. Robinson, who came to faith and started this ministry of financial advising after digging out of 6 figures worth of debt. Edward's powerful story of having all the odds stacked against him and finding a way to lead his family into financial and faithful success is one that is sure to inspire and encourage you. But I will let you hear it from the man himself. Edward, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, Edward, I just want to hear a little bit more. Can you give myself and the viewers just some background of just kind of what you went through and kind of how you got out of it?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in a city called Buffalo, New York. If you know anything about the Buffalo Bills, that's where I hail from, Western New York. Anyway, so I was born in an impoverished urban community, like a lot of kids around the country. I was born to a single mother. I have 3 sisters, and so that's kind of where I hail from. So money for us growing up was always an issue, if you can imagine that. I still remember being a kid taking paper food stamps to the store. For those that grew up in the 90s. Anyway, long story short, fast forward, I became a believer when I was 17 years old and then ended up going to Bible college and then just trying to figure out my life and married my wife and moved to New Jersey. That's where she hails from. But while I was in New Jersey, I was a part of a church that planted in poor communities on purpose. And so I always wanted to be a part of that sort of movement. So I found that church, found that community of people. But one of the things that I learned being a part of that church in this urban space was we never had enough money. And so what happened is my pastor, my mentor, who now is a president of a seminary in Richmond, but we talked a lot about the issue of trying to find funds for urban churches. And so anyway, that sent me on a sort of a rabbit trail, if you will, to try to discover and uncover and sort of unlock this code of how do you figure out money for missions specifically. And so I read every book that I possibly could on anything regarding faith and finance, anything on Bible and money. I mean, I read all the Proverbs. I did all of that. And I read, like I said, several books. And I came to some conclusions. And then after a while, what also happened is, so that started on, like I said, I was just trying to solve a missional problem. And then I realized I had a personal financial problem, which I was 6 figures in debt. And so me and my wife, we took some years to dig ourselves out of debt because really what I was trying to get to was to a place of freedom. That was the biggest thing for me. It's not, we're not big on materialism in my particular family, but we are big on freedom and flexibility and doing what God has called us to do. And what I realized is that if you're in financial bondage, it's hard to have the freedom to do all of what you feel like the Lord has called you to do. And so that was our goal, that was our mission. And so that journey led us to being personally debt free, and it kind of just gave me a passion to begin to help people with their money. And so going back 10 years ago, I remember helping people with their budgets. I remember people being in my living room and going over Excel spreadsheets and debt snowball calculators and budgets and so on and so forth. And then one day I realized I actually have a passion for this. And so I was
Wow.
toggling between pastoring and financial advising. I've been a pastor for over the last 5 years, and
Wow.
that's basically where I'll land. I'll be somewhere with one foot in the church world and another foot in the business world as a financial advisor. So that's a little bit about how I got here.
Yeah. So a few questions came up. That's amazing. One question I had is, how did you and your wife get to a point where you were more than six figures in debt? And what did that feel like? And what was your process of getting out of that?
Yeah, so most of that was student loan debt, right? So a lot of people can relate to that, especially if you haven't gotten the student loan forgiveness at this point.
Yeah.
But a lot of people can understand what it's like to be in school loan debt, and then some of it was credit cards, and some of it was medical bills, and so on and so forth. So by the time we piled it up, that's where we were. What it felt like was I didn't have the flexibility that I wanted. And that mattered a lot to me because of some of the ideas that I began to generate in my mind. And so, what I wanted to be able to do is have the freedom to exercise those plans, those ideas, some of those, work on some of those dreams, if you will. And
Yeah.
so that's what it felt like. It felt like we were hampered. It felt like I had to go do the certain things, like I had to work at a certain job because they were paying me a certain thing, whether or not I felt it was my passion or not, so on and so forth. So I just wanted to get to a place where I didn't have to do certain things because I had to do them. I wanted to get to a place where I got to do certain
Mm.
things because I wanted to do
Okay, that's a really good point. And I was going to
them.
ask, what would you say to someone who said, I know what my calling is, but my finances are so bad, I just can't start. What advice would you give to that person?
Yeah. So, especially for believers, I tell them this: money is an excellent servant, but a terrible master.
Mm,
I'm going to say that again. Money is an excellent servant, but a terrible master. So you typically have two options. You can either master money or you can continue to let money master you, right? And the
yeah.
Bible has already told us that we cannot serve two masters. And so
Yes.
with that being the case, if somebody is in a situation where they're saying, I just can't get started, then let's go through some steps, right? Let's take a couple of steps. Let's do a couple of things that we can do. First of all, we got a basic problem. It's a math problem. It's not hard. It's not complicated. Two plus two will always equal four. And that math problem is how much money do you have coming in versus how much money do you have going out, right? Let's just look at it. So usually what I do with my clients is I sit them down, I send them what we call a cash flow worksheet, and we just look at what you got coming in versus what you have coming out. Because there's only three ways to solve a money problem, right? This my sister tells me this all the time. She's in finance as well. She says there's three ways to solve a money problem, right? You can make more money, you can spend less money, or you can get some money back from Uncle Sam. That's all. That's that's pretty much it. So we got to decide which one of these areas are we going to tackle. Are we going to try to
Mm,
make some more money? Are we going to try to spend some less money? Or are we going to try to figure out how to get some money back from Uncle Sam? And if you're smart, you're using really all three in one.
yeah. This is really powerful stuff here that you're saying. And I'm assuming that most people, at least the first time they meet with you, they probably don't
Mhm.
know a lot of this. And it might seem like common sense, but you're even blowing my mind with some of the stuff right now. So in your practice, what are some of the biggest financial problems, financial struggles that you see people coming to you with?
Yeah, I think the biggest one right now is just inflation, the cost of everything being higher than it used to be. And so everybody's really wrestling through and struggling through inflation. And that hits people in different ways, whether it's gas prices or whether it's the price of a mortgage when you try to buy a house. Everything costs more. And so what's happening is that our the rate at which we're getting paid in our salaries or even in our businesses are not keeping up with inflation. And so once again, let's go back to those three money problems or the three money solutions. We can make more money, spend less money, or get money back. And what's happening is we're just not making enough money as a nation on average. to keep up with the cost of everything. So that would be number one. The other thing that I would say to people that goes along with that, and the reason why I mentioned the cash flow worksheet, is because people have to get to a place where they're doing a budget. There are Fortune 500 companies, and they all have budgets. So we don't think we need one is a little crazy,
Hmm.
right? And so if Fortune 500 companies have budgets, then we should have a budget for our households as well. That's just the way of the world. That's a natural law, right? You have to, even Jesus says, who goes to build a building and doesn't count the cost, right? So it's just a natural law. In order for us to have an accounting system, you have to have an accounting system. As believers, we know we are stewards. What is a steward? A steward is a manager. You cannot manage what you do not count. And
Mm.
so budgeting is very, very important, and it gets us to the point where just understanding thoroughly what our income is so that we can begin to do some of the other things that we need to do. And it just that would be the main one that I see. The other struggle that I see is in regards to, it just kind of depends on the person. If they're an entrepreneur, oftentimes entrepreneurs are underprotected. What I mean by that is, if you are an employee, then you have certain insurances in place that your employer pays for, as well as your employer pays taxes for you. So when you think about insurance and taxes, your employer covers a lot of that. For example, you have life insurance, group life insurance policy at work. You might have a short-term disability policy at work. You might have your healthcare insurance at work, so on and so forth. But when somebody launches out on their own in entrepreneurship, a lot of times they don't cover themselves in terms of making sure they got a tax system in place, and then making sure also that they have the proper insurance, that they've covered for the insurances that they lost due to their non-employment with a job right now. So those are a couple of things that I tend to see, and the second one I gave you was especially tended towards entrepreneurs.
Okay. And kind of just staying on the topic with entrepreneurs, I think you're about to speak some encouragement to a few people here. There's a lot of people that I've met with, and I'm sure you've met with, that are just miserable in their jobs. They work a 9 to 5, or they work 90 hours a week, but they're on salary and they're just miserable day after day. And they're like, you know what, Edward, I would love to just have that freedom that you have. Um, you know, should I quit my job? What should I do? What's the best path? Should I just quit and go all in on the business? Is it a leap of faith? What should I do?
Yeah, and I would say it's different for everybody because it depends on the situation. Here's what I would say. I would say take the leap, but make it make sense, right? So there's a movie called
Hmm.
Shawshank Redemption.
Great. I've
Yeah,
seen it.
great movie. Yeah, and in that movie, the guy's in jail unjustly, and so he decides that he's going to have an escape plan. And so what he does is he digs out a hole in the wall, and in his digging of the hole in the wall, he digs it out little by little every night. So the little bit of wall that he digs out, he puts it in his pocket. And when he's in the yard, he's shaking out the gravel, right? Little by little, day by day, until he gets all the way through the wall. And the reason why I use that analogy is because, hey, some people need to save up enough to take the leap, right? Some people need to make sure that they, little by little, let's put some money away so that I can get to the point where, hey, if my business needs me to not take anything from it for 6 months or to a year, then I have the ability to do that because I've saved up and I've had the discipline to do the little by little saving so that I can get to do some of the things that I want to do. For some people, it's going to be, I love the leap of faith, but as a financial advisor, I'm going to tell you, make sure that leap has some equity backing you so that when things get tight in the business, and when you have to play an employee before yourself, or when you have to put money back into that website, or whatever, when you have to put money back into marketing, then you're not so desperate that you have to take money out of the business prematurely before the fruit fully grows.
Right, exactly. And so as far as that leap goes, how much leeway, how much time should they have? God forbid things don't work out.
Yeah, I would say 6 months to a year.
Six
Yeah,
months
worth
to
of
Okay.
yeah, at least 6 months worth of savings. That to give you some time to breathe a little bit in the business. If you could get to a year, that would be even better. But I would say minimum 6 months of
Okay.
savings.
Okay. That makes sense. And
Yep.
I've studied a little bit about finance. Obviously not as much as you. I'm already learning a lot here. But I know a lot of it is really just mindset.
It
So,
is.
can you speak more to the biggest problems with mindset that people have around finance?
Yeah, I would say the biggest problem number one for me, and especially I'm gonna go back to speaking to believers. The biggest mindset challenge is a lack of humility.
Mm,
It's a lack of humility. A lack of humility is what keeps people from wanting to live a lesser or lower lifestyle in order to live a better lifestyle later. And so that lack of humility, and when I talk about lifestyle, I'm saying, hey, do we have to eat out this many times per week? Hey, do we have to go on an extensive vacation? Can we do a local vacation where we just drive somewhere for an hour or whatever the case might be? Right? Do we need all of these lifestyle things? And for most people, for many people, the challenge is just I feel like I deserve it.
mm,
Yep. The mentality of I feel like I deserve it is what keeps us in a consumeristic mentality, and it keeps us from being humble enough to make the sacrifice in order to see something better later.
right, right. No, that's a huge one. And even in the Bible, we're encouraged to be humble many
Yeah.
times. Man who exalts himself will be humbled, but the humbled will be exalted. And
Hmm.
that's such a great metaphor. And this is something I teach. I've said it before on my podcast, is that, God's formula for growth is some short-term pain and discomfort for some long-term pleasure. So, Edward, as someone who's been through it, you got out of that six figures. You got to a place where you probably didn't know what the heck you were going to do. And I've been in a place, not financially, but in a mindset. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I can
Hmm.
tell you that God can get you out, and more often than not, it's a little bit quicker than you think it is. So, can you kind of speak to that process, that mindset, and just finding that faith?
Yeah, I would say on a practical note, you need a dream, and you need a dream that's bigger than the hurdles you have to go through to get to it.
Mm,
And when I say bigger, what I really mean is it's more important to you, it's more meaningful to you. There's been a couple of times in my life where I've had an idea that nearly made me cry. Just the thought of it. For example, let me give you one. Remember, I told you about the church that I was a part of?
hmm
I had an idea a couple years ago to fund urban churches.
Yeah.
And when I had that idea and the way that I was thinking about it, it nearly made me cry thinking about the concept of being able to fund urban churches and urban pastors. So I said, I'm going to do that. And the reason why, so my point with that is when me and my wife got together to sit down and talk about that, we had to have a dream that was bigger than the sacrifice we were going to make in order to get to it. And so my wife's dream was, hey, she wants to go to Disney with the kids, have the pictures, have the moment, da da da. My dream was, hey, I actually want to start a family business, right? And my wife wanted to be a part of that with me. So our dream of having a family business, starting a family business, enjoying moments with our family was bigger than this and more meaningful than the sacrifices we had to make to get there. And so I tell people from a mindset perspective, there has to be a dream inside of you that's connected to the lordship of Jesus Christ, right?
Yes.
Because that's the most ultimate thing. That dream being subject to Christ means it has to mean more to you than the sacrifice you have to make. And if it's not, then you won't do it because you don't value it.
Yes.
It's not worth it to you. And so find some reason that is worth it to you. And let me give you this quick tidbit. Usually the things that are the most meaningful to you are on the other side of something that is most painful to you.
Yes.
Okay. So let's go back to the dream about being able to fund urban churches. That dream and that meaningfulness that it had for me was on the other side of a lot of pain of me seeing churches in urban communities close. So a lot of times the solution to the pain is where the meaning is. For some people, it's I had a terrible childhood because um, of this, that, or the third reason. And because of that terrible pain from childhood, I want to solve that for other people. And I want to make sure other kids don't go through that particular thing. Right. And so then your meaning is on the other side of your pain. And your purpose is on the other side of your pain, if I'm making sense. And so
Yes.
that is I found to be a good sort of metal detector, right? So if sometimes you have a metal detector and you're on the beach, it's like ding, 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 ding. The metal detector is where is the pain, and oftentimes you'll find the purpose on the other side of that. And so
Yes.
that's kind of how you detect what it is that you're going to find to be most meaningful to you.
Yeah. And guys, what Edward just said in the last 3 minutes is huge. Like rewind and listen to that. Everything you just said, it just completely echoes everything I've learned about this. And so I'm just going to kind of throw some tidbits out there too. Number one, the magic is in the pain you've been avoiding. And when you say, it's got to be meaningful, I want you guys to understand God placed that on your heart. He placed you in that position. He placed Edward in that poverty, in that urban area, so that specifically he could be that someone to help urban churches grow. Now, this other thing I want to say is this idea of fractional commitment. And you may have heard me say this before, but if you're not 100% committed to something, I want you to think in terms of math here. Let's say that you start out day one, you're 99% committed. Well, what happens when you multiply by less than one day over day? Let's multiply 99, or I'm sorry, 0.99 times 0.99. Day after day, what happens is it starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. It takes a long time, but eventually you get to a place where you're at zero commitment. And when you're at
Yeah.
zero commitment, that's where depression happens because now you're living a life that was not meant for you. You're living a life that God, placed you on this earth. It's different from what God intended for you to do. So, guys, the last few minutes, just rewind that and listen to that 100 times because everything he said is so powerful. You need to understand. Now, I just kind of want to shift gears here because you made enough. You've been making some really good points here today. I really appreciate it. But you made another point that you and your wife, your goals were aligned. I, can you kind of speak to um, the power and the advantage that comes with aligning your dreams with your wife and your family, and just kind of what that looked like?
Yeah, everybody has to be on board, right? And so one of the things that you have to do if you're going to go toward anything is you have to have a conversation with the people around you. If you're married, that's your wife, that's your children. Everybody has to understand where we're going because what you don't want is people in the car telling you to turn around every 5 seconds or
Mm,
telling you to pull over or telling you to
mm,
park, right? Everybody has to understand. So before you head toward that destination, right? Before, get in the car, don't go anywhere yet. Before you put the address on the GPS, everybody in the car has to understand this is where we're going, right? And hey, then you figure out what does everybody need. The kids might need a DVD player in the back, right, to keep them entertained for the road trip. Your wife might need my wife likes sunflower seeds in the passenger seat, right? I need a Red Bull, whatever it is. But you make sure that everybody understands, and then you have to compromise some, right? Whenever I take a road trip, and I'm using this analogy for a reason. Whenever I take a road trip, I never get there when I want to get there because
mm,
sometimes I do have to like, all right, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. Hey, I want to stop and get a donut. Hey, right? But
mm.
for the most part, we're still heading all in the same direction. Marriage, community, relationships, there's all some level of compromise. How do we get where we're going at a pace that's good for all of us? And because what you don't want to do, and I've seen this happen, is you don't want financial success to ruin your marriage because it can.
Wow, can you speak more to that? That's amazing. Can you
Yeah,
speak
yeah,
more
yeah,
to
yeah,
that?
yeah. You can spend so much time in the business that you marry it, and you ignore your spouse at home. And so you want to be at a pace that makes sense for everybody. And I'm gonna tell you this: I have 5 children. Every kid that I had lowers my miles per hour limit by at least 5. Right. And so what I'm saying to you is life slows down a little bit more, and a little bit more. Every child you have, and it slows down. And when you get married, it slows down a little bit as well. And so my point with saying that is, but you still have to be headed in the right direction. And so what you don't want to do is spend so much time focused on the success that you lose sight of your spouse. There's been some pretty high profile celebrities that's happened to and just even here recently that I was reading about yesterday and this week. So anyway, but you don't want to be so busy, so on the road, so many hours in the office that you forget to come home, kiss your wife, and remind her of your love for her, and so on and so forth. Same thing. You don't want so much busyness that you miss all the time with your kids. Now, the truth of the matter is, you're going to miss some time with wife and children if you're going to have any level of success. But you don't want to miss all the time to the point where they don't know you and you don't know them.
Wow. Wow. Don't, I love that. Don't get to the point where you don't even recognize your spouse. That is,
Yeah,
that is good. Man, we could
yeah.
have a whole episode just on that topic alone. I had a question about, you made mention that you never get to your destination when you want to. In other words, things never, ever turn out the way that we expect, which is the root of pretty much all unhappiness. And I can say that from experience. So, can you kind of speak to navigating life's surprises, the things that we don't expect, and kind of tie in, some financial wisdom around that?
Yeah, I think you make plans loosely. So I'm a financial planner. Sometimes I get annoyed with Christians, and I am one, but I get annoyed with us because sometimes we think we're not supposed to plan because God is sovereign and nothing really goes a particular way. But even though things don't always turn out, one of the things that we learn from the book of James is we're just supposed to say, Lord willing, after we make a plan, right? Hey, I'm going to move here. I'm going to do this. Everything is Lord willing, right? We write our plans in pencil and we hand God the eraser.
That's
But we still have to plan, right? We still have to write the plans down. And we say, well, Lord, if the Lord is willing, this is what's going to happen. And so I think you're somewhere in between this zone of planning for tomorrow but not being anxious for tomorrow, because you know that the Lord has the control over it. And so that's typically what I do. And then I know how life works. I know life throws curveballs. So you just kind of got to be ready to roll with the punches. But as far as the dream goes, my destination pretty much stays the same.
yeah,
Sometimes I come up to a street and it says detour or road closed. That's life. And so having the flexibility to go around the detour, um, then that's what makes you a good driver. But the destination remains the same. But the time on the GPS changes. You you thought you were going to get there at 12. Yeah, it's 12 and you're still 3 hours away sometimes. And so that's life. And it's just being flexible and knowing. So here, so the point in that is to say, I expect things to not always go my way,
mm,
but I expect the Lord to be in control of it all, and I still find a way to have a good time no matter what.
that's that's beautiful. That is well said. Um, and you made mention the book of James.
Mhm.
Something I really like from James 2:17, faith without work is dead. So you made a really good
Mhm.
point. People say, uh, I'm just going to go with the flow. God's got it. Whatever God wants me to do. And I always say, you can't make life change sitting on the couch. You have to take
Mhm.
action. So James 2:17 says, faith without work is dead. So you got to
Mhm.
put a little action in. You got to be
For
willing.
sure.
Yeah. And like you
For
said,
sure.
a destination is important. You need to have that destination. It's got to be meaningful, and you find that meaningful destination from God. And another quote that I really like is, if you shoot at everything, you hit nothing. And if you
Mhm.
aim at nothing, you hit everything that you don't want to hit. Um,
Mhm.
So being able to get through those detours, like you said, it makes you a good driver. But you made a really, really good point here, which is, write the plans in pencil and let God have the eraser. Like you got to at
Mm-hmm.
least have a plan. And as
Mm-hmm.
long as that plan is centered towards that destination, that godly calling, give it to God, take the action, and speak with Him. So can you kind of speak to
Yep.
um, when you make that plan? So you seem like a guy that is really good at planning, especially financial planning. Um,
Yeah.
can you kind of talk about how that relates to, making a plan and hearing from God and kind of aligning your financial goals and like any of your plans with God's?
Yeah. One of the things that I've learned, so I go back to the book of Genesis. And if you think about the book of Genesis and you think about God's position with Adam, Adam had way more freedom than he might have perceived. And the reason, and so remember, there was only one rule, there was only one restriction.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else, he literally says you are free to eat, right? So he says, dress it and keep it as it pertains to the garden. That means protect it, manage it. So instead of going with the flow, Adam was the flow.
Ooh, that's good.
He was the flow. He was supposed to be God's extension of rule and reign on the earth. He's an extender of God's kingdom, and he is the one who. Remember, Adam named the animals, and God said, "Amen." Essentially, Adam said, "That's a lion." God said, "Okay, Amen." Now that's crazy to think about
Wow.
because now Adam is participating in creation by naming things, and whoever names something has authority over it. By the way, so my point with saying all of that is to say that Christ has got us to the place where this is called the law of liberty, right? Christ's new law is called the law of liberty. So it's a law of freedom, not simply a law of restriction.
Hmm.
What are the main two laws that the whole New Testament law hinges on? Love God and love your neighbor.
Yes.
Those are active laws. They're not restrictive laws. The Ten Commandments are made up of restrictive laws, do nots. The Christian law is made up of do's. Love God, love neighbor. My point was saying all of that to say, theologically speaking, we're in a place where we have a lot of freedom.
Hmm. Yeah.
So we have freedom to plan, we have freedom to create, we have freedom to do. But our freedom should not fringe upon our responsibility and duty to love God in all that we do.
Hmm.
My point with saying that is people get confused. They're waiting on an angel, a message from an angel. And I'm telling them, go and do. Well, I think I should create this business. I think I should have this idea. Does it honor God? Does it bless people? Go do. Well, I'm waiting. I mean, so like I said, I'm waiting on an angel. I'm waiting on Gabriel, somebody to tell me to it, go and
Yeah.
be rich in good works.
Yeah.
Do all the good you can while you can to all the people you can.
Yeah.
Right? Go and do. Feel the freedom to honor God by going and doing. To feel the freedom. The other, and then my responsibility and my help is I want them to actually have a financial plan that will accompany them to be able to do the things that are in their heart to do, as long as those things honor God and bless people.
Yes. Yeah.
Go and do.
That
And then do it smartly with a good financial plan. Go ahead.
that
Yeah.
is, you've just been pouring out some deep wisdom today. I appreciate it so much. And, you know, as an entrepreneur myself, I've encountered times where I just wanted to prepare. And I just wanted to wait. But you really don't learn and you really don't understand what it is
Mm-mm.
until you go out and do. You can read every book there is to read on wrestling or public speaking, but until you're out there in the middle of the arena Till you're the
Yeah,
man in the arena, you're not going to understand truly what it means.
yeah. You got to go check out Ecclesiastes 11:4, and what you'll learn from that is meteorologists make for terrible farmers.
Mm.
Meteorologists make for terrible farmers. And you're like, what does that mean? What is that? Ecclesiastes is deep for a reason because it wants you to sit and think.
Hmm.
But the idea in that passage has to do with the fact that those who study the clouds and regard the winds neither sow nor reap.
Yes.
If the farmer sits on the front porch waiting on perfect weather, he will not plant and he will not reap a crop.
Hmm.
If he goes out there and all he's doing every time he goes outside, he's checking for the winds and he's trying to study to see if the rain clouds are coming, he's going to miss his opportunity to plant in that season.
Yeah. 100%. I couldn't have said it better myself. Um, and wow, so much good stuff to just soak in such a little amount. I'm gonna have to rewatch this 100 times. This has just been amazing. I hope that we can have another conversation in the future. I'm gonna ask one more question, and then I'll
Mm-hmm.
give you some time back to your day. Um, what would you tell people who have this belief that, money's the root of all evil? I shouldn't be chasing it. Everything you're telling me is just about money. God doesn't want you to have money, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's a very common ideology, especially in the church world. Um, I tell them that the scripture says the love of money is the root of all evil, not money itself. Um, but I think we got to let's just be practical here. At the end of the day, you got to go to work or you got to have a business because you're trying to get some income.
Mm.
So here's the question. I'm gonna go back to something I said earlier, which is money is a terrible servant. I mean, a terrible master, but an excellent servant. And the idea there is simple. You get to choose whether or not money's going to run you or whether or not you're going to command money and tell it what to do for you. And I'm trying to get us to a space that says money is going to be a tool that we use to worship God. That's it. That's the plan. The
Mm.
question for you is going to be how do you become rich toward God? And the concept of being rich toward God comes out of a parable in the book of Luke called the rich fool. And the rich fool had a lot of money, saved a lot of money, had a good crop, and saved even more money just so he could consume it upon himself. The problem is he wasn't rich toward God. And so I don't want you spending all of your life chasing money, but especially for the men that are going to watch this podcast, you have a responsibility to provide. I do not know a Christian man who has done anything significant without pressure, including Jesus himself, had
Mm.
pressure.
Oh yeah.
Every one of us have pressure. God has called us to step in, to protect, and to provide. Now, that has gotten confused in our culture, but it's still the mandate of a man to provide for his family. That's pressure.
Amen.
Now, we get to alleviate some of that pressure by leaning on Christ himself. But nevertheless, at the same time, that is still our call. It is still our duty. All I'm trying to get guys to do is to actually have the tools necessary to build a financial house and to command their dollars and tell them where to go, rather than being strung around wondering where the money went. You either get to tell it where to go or you'll wonder where it went. Those are your only two options as a man in America in 2024. So all of that sounds great and theoretical. All of the anti-money ideas is really good theory. But at the end of the day, you got to pay some bills and you got to have a budget and you got to go to work. What are we going to do about that? What are we going to do
Mm.
about you having enough money for savings and retirement? What are we going
Mhm.
to do about your desire to be a blessing to your children? What are we going to do about that desire for you to bless your wife with that trip that you want? These are all practical things. I'm not interested in theoretical conversations at this point. I'm interested in theological conversations that have both theology and practicality attached to them, What are we going to do about your money problems? How are we going to serve the Lord with what you got? And that's it.
Yes. Yes. Guys, hitting the raw truth today, just as I said we would. But Edward, this has been such a complete honor to have you on the show today. I've gained so much wisdom just in this short amount of time together, and I'm sure the listeners will too. So, Edward, if we want to connect with you, if we want to learn more from you, how can we reach out to you?
Yep, I'm edward.robinson@thrivent.com. Edward.robinson@thrivent.com. And Thrivent is right here behind me, thrivent.com. And then the other way I would say is people can shoot me a text. I'm at 434-448-3330. 434-448-3330. Love to sit down with you, talk with you about financial planning, how to be rich toward God, how to make the most out of what you got. Some people are trying to change jobs. Some people are going into entrepreneurship. We just want to make sure that you have a financial plan that is well and right and good for you.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening. I just want to give a huge thank you to Edward one more time for coming on the show. If you guys gained any value from this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe. We will take all the support we can get. We thank you for it. And if there's any topic you'd like to learn more about in the future, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you'd love to learn more about. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.
Peace.